So my name is Michael Nelson. I'm a faculty member in the College of Forestry and Forest Ecosystems and Society, and I'm Sarah's major professor. And I'm honored, pleased to be able to introduce Sarah's her presentation. No, what's the thing called?
Oh,
project.
project.
Her project presentation. We're all used to thesis defenses, but this is a project presentation. Sarah came to us a couple years ago from the University of Houston, and she's been here 2 years. It's been a really wonderful 2 years. For those of you, many of you know Sarah. The thing that I really like most about Sarah is how she combines an incredibly hard work ethic and really amazing talents with professionalism and kind of a ridiculously positive attitude, suspiciously positive attitude. But she's so pleasant, you can't not like her for it. That's the problem. So one of the things I always do with my students is I try to find a poem that introduces their work. Sarah's work is centered at the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest on our newly established Discovery Trail. It's an interpretive nature trail. But unlike some nature trails, what we're really interested in is, can these kinds of experiences actually impact us ethically? Can we have these experiences, and specifically with regard to this project, can they actually impact our character? And specifically, as you'll see, the character traits or the virtues of care. Can we become more caring people because of these experiences? So thinking about virtue and care, I chose a poem called Beans by Mary Oliver. They're not like peaches or squash. Plumpness isn't for them. They like being lean, as if for the narrow path. The beans themselves sit quietly inside their green pods. Instinctively, one picks with care, never tearing down the fine vine, never not noticing their crisp bodies, or feeling their willingness for the pot, for the fire. I have thought sometimes that something, I can't name it, watches as I walk the rows, accepting the gift of their lives to assist mine. I know what you think. This is foolishness. They're only vegetables. Even the blossoms with which they begin are small and pale, hardly significant. Our hands or minds, our feet hold more intelligence. With this I have no quarrel. But what about virtue? Sarah.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you all for all of you for being here today. We do have some folks joining us on video conferencing software. So you see this lime green box around the slide. I'm going to unmute them very briefly and just make sure everything's working for them before we get started. Lissy, Mark, and Ryan, you're on. Can you see everything? Is all your audio, video working okay?
Good for me.
Mark?
Audio fine here.
Okay.
Yeah, fine here as well.
All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and mute y'all, and we will unmute you during the Q&A. Thanks for joining us. Okay, sorry about that. We have a lot of working parts with this presentation. So you all look like you're happy with donuts and coffee and fruit. Everything is vegan and gluten-free, so hopefully everyone can eat it. It's also nut-free. I can't do soy, guys. There's still soy in everything. Please compost anything that you got back there. It's all compostable, and there is a paper bag at the back of the room. So with that, let's start. Thank you for coming to my culminating presentation for my master's degree. I'm a Master of Arts student in the Environmental Arts and Humanities program, and the first cohort actually of the program. And today I will be presenting about my graduate work on the Discovery Trail Interpretive Experience, which is based at the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest. I'm going to highlight 3 experiences of place related to the Andrews Forest Discovery Trail. The first is the interpretive experience that we created for students. The second is my personal experience leading students on the field trips, which I captured in a creative nonfiction essay. The final experience is the student experience, which I interpreted using data we collected before, during, and after the Discovery Trail experience. So, as Michael and I were conversing earlier, just to start with a bit of a disclaimer, this is not a traditional defense, it's not a traditional thesis. I'm presenting today about a collaborative, research-driven, place-based education project. I've been studying under Dr. Michael Nelson, and I've been assisting Dr. Kari O'Connell, Dr. Mark Schultz, and Dr. Lasika Relnick with the Discovery Trail project. They collaborated to create the iPad-delivered curriculum actually before I came to Corvallis. So over the last 2 years, classes of middle and high school students have been visiting the Andrews Forest on field trips. So far, we've had 119 students participate in the Discovery Trail experience. I became involved in the project after the first pilot field trip in the summer of 2016. At this point, the students were using PowerPoints on the iPad, so it wasn't yet an interactive program, and they were responding to our questions using pen and paper. After getting some help from developers at the College of Forestry, they were able to integrate the program fully into the iPads, and last spring we started using the interactive Discovery Trail curriculum. After those trips last spring, over the summer, I refined the interpretive experience using feedback that we received from the students and the teachers in those first trips. I clarified project goals and created learning objectives. I streamlined the curriculum, the field trip logistics, and the materials for teachers. I created a system so that we could match all of the student data and follow their journey, and also to keep better track of who was approved for research on the trail. I proposed pre- and post-trail questions to use for our analysis, made changes to our post-trail research materials, and helped solve a few of our technology issues. I also spearheaded the data management and the analysis for the project. So those were my contributions to the interpretive experience, even though it was created before I came here. I also contributed to the project by writing this creative nonfiction essay and by writing an education research paper. So today you'll hear about the interpretive experience as it currently is. That's after all of the changes we made last summer. And in the fall of 2017, we had 2 classes complete this improved interpretive experience, and we'll have 3 more this spring. So when I present my research at the end of the talk today, it'll be covering those 2 trips that we had in the fall of 2017. Though this is my project, and I did lead a lot of the efforts, this has been collaborative from the very beginning. So all of the changes that we made on this project, all of the decisions were made as a group. And first, in our talk today, I'm going to be talking about place. And I'm seeing now that y'all can see a little bit of my screen. Sorry about that. I'll be talking about place from a theoretical perspective. Then I'll interweave 2 experiences of place, the interpretive experience that I just told you a little bit about, and my personal experience leading the field trips, which will be shared with one excerpt from my creative nonfiction essay. And then we'll talk about the student experience and the typology of care that I developed based on the research analysis that we did from the data we collected from the students. The reason why I'm combining some of these the 2 experiences in the middle is because I really want you to imagine yourself at the Andrews Forest and understand what it's like for the students to be there. We're going to wrap up with some limitations and next steps regarding the project, some thank yous, and then a Q&A session. During the Q&A session, I encourage you to direct any questions to me, but also please feel free to direct any questions to the group as a whole because this is collaborative. So just like we do with the students who visit the Andrews, I'm going to start out with an introduction to place. The students become acquainted with place in the classroom by watching a video about the Andrews, and then when they're on site, they receive an introduction to place from Mark Schultz, the Andrews Forest Director. I'm going to get a little bit more theoretical for all of you, since this is research-driven, and the students don't necessarily need to know all of the theory when we're in the field. And this was a major part of my research. So today I will journey to the place of the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest. This place was established in 1948 to study forestry practices and the effects of logging within the Lookout Creek watershed. Within a few decades, more ecological research was conducted, including forest succession, species population dynamics, disturbance ecology, and environmental monitoring. In recent decades, the HJA community embraced the diverse ways we can know a place by supporting long-term inquiry that was both creative and philosophical from artists, thinkers, and writers who explore the ways that humans relate to non-human individuals, groups, and systems. So taking a humanities perspective, when we think about the place that is the Andrews Forest, we could see it as more than just the Lookout Creek watershed, or more than just a place that's bounded by steep ridges and covered in lush old growth. This place is more than the moss-covered boulders in the cold, clear streams. It's more than a site that was logged to understand the impacts of forestry practices. This place includes sentient beings who see and interact with their habitat in different ways. Animals like the threatened northern spotted owl, whose life depends on old growth. The people who are using this forest are doing more than conducting research for human gain. They're building a wealth of knowledge about ways we humans impact the forest, how we can limit these impacts, and even help the ecosystems thrive. Others embrace traditional ecological knowledge and creative writing as a way to know place. They question the very assumption that the forest should be primarily for human use, and they explore how we humans can embrace our place as kin within an interconnected biotic community. These people studying and interacting with the forest all have a different understanding of place. We interpret place through our lived experiences, our values, and our emotions. So based on these varied interpretations, we could argue that the Andrews Forest can't be defined by the decades-long empirical work alone. We need to describe place using scientific as well as historical, emotional, and experiential narratives. So I started with a description of place for you to understand our motivations behind creating the Discovery Trail Interpretive Experience. Our objective is to increase students' knowledge about place while providing them with opportunities to reflect on their relationships to place and contemplate any responsibilities they have for stewardship behavior. Place-based education is contextual experiential learning. This learning happens in places that capture the complexities of historical, social, ecological, and political phenomenon. Place-based education moves out of the classroom and into the field by exploring ecological processes, human impacts on the environment, citizen responsibilities, all firsthand. So learning in place, particularly with an interdisciplinary approach like we're using on the Discovery Trail, invites students to cultivate relationships with place and explore what it means to care for place and why caring is important. Eco-phenomenologists, environmental educators, philosophers, and rhetoricians promote the awe-inspiring and behavior-motivating impact of sensory-rich lived experiences that inspire learners to connect to place in tangible ways and to cultivate virtues like love, respect, gratitude, empathy, and care. Incorporating arts and humanities approaches like narrative, values, reflection, and creative imagining alongside experiential, empirical inquiry in place fosters emotional attachment and caring. Sorry, so many clicks. It fosters emotional attachment and caring for our collective socio-ecological well-being. I'm glad I was able to add a little bit of humor, and it was just by me messing up. Thanks for that laugh. So for this next part of the presentation, I'm going to interweave the interpretive experience and my experience leading field trips. To reiterate, the interpretive experience was developed for middle and high school students visiting the Andrews Forest, specifically for groups of 30 students or less, because we have 10 iPads that we use, and they group up in groups of 2 to 3. So at the forest, the students receive that introduction to place, then they go on a silent sensory walk, they complete 3 stops on the Discovery Trail, and we wrap up with a group reflection activity and a written survey that we use for our analysis. Again, my goal for this section of this talk is not just to explain the interpretive experience and not just read you some of my writing. I really want you to imagine yourself there and think about what this experience might be like for the students who come visit the Andrews Forest. So groups start their day at headquarters under a pavilion. After they receive the introduction to place, similar to the one you heard today, we read from Forest Understory, which is a book of poetry and prose written by writers and residents at the Andrews Forest. I typically read The Art of Science by Vicki Graham, and I'm going to share a short excerpt from that poem with you today. Begin with love, a composite of science, art, imagination, and the pure world of the senses, with the things the hand can touch, the peeling, papery bark of yew, the curve of a snail's shell, the beard lichens wiry hair with color and taste and smell, and the call of a thrush at dusk, the velvet glide of a spotted owl. Begin with love and the questions the heart asks, why stones arrange themselves in lapped patterns on a gravel bar, how old growth trees resist the quickly mutating pathogens that attack them, where the orchid lacking chlorophyll gets its sugars. Let the body, then the heart, learn the forest and remember. Data collection, computer analysis, and digitalized imaging begin with hand and eye, tongue, nose, and ear. So now I'm going to read an excerpt from my creative nonfiction essay. Most of the essay occurs at the Andrews Forest during one field trip in October. The photos that are accompanying this reading were taken by me last week, so it's not fall at all, so you're going to have to let the pros transport you there to that season. Hopefully it will do that effectively. And we just welcomed the students to the forest. Mark just welcomed the students to the forest, and I am just finishing up the poem I shared with you. As they listened to the poem under the salt salmon pavilion, the students shifted where they stood. They looked down at the concrete slab, up at the plyboard ceiling, and past us to the conifers beyond. I finished the reading, and we lined up for the silent sensory walk at the edge habitat of headquarters and forest. We straddled a borderland between the inviting lush forest and the small landscape dominated by humans, occupied by cars, buildings, pavement, and turf grass. We asked the students to silently and individually engage with place and resist the urge to use any electronics. We encouraged them to embrace all of their senses, attuning to the sights, scents, sounds, and textures of the forest at their own pace. Mark entered the forest first, and one by one, each student followed 15 seconds behind the one preceding them. Half of the teenagers were ahead of me on the trail as I entered the shadowy forest opening, and the remaining students waited behind me. I heard a rustle and looked to my right, hoping to see some wildlife. With my next step, I realized the sound was the sharp teeth of an Oregon grape plant grabbing hold of my synthetic rain pants. Even with the absence of rain, the forest was damp. The centuries-old forest canopy and the lichen stored water from the last rain, slowly releasing liquid one drip at a time. Everything before me epitomized the ethereal spirit of this forest. The verdant fuzzy moss, the glistening beard lichen draped on spindly hemlock branches, the meandering trail with pockets of shadows and illumination, and the magnanimous Doug firs. I ascended the uneven rocky trail littered with golden vine maple leaves and joined the students at the kiosk near the Discovery Trail entrance. The cadence of animated dialogue and laughter from the high schoolers dominated the forest soundscape as we waited for the rest of them to emerge from the trail. "Let's group up," I said. How was your time in the forest? What did you hear? What did you smell? Did you see anything cool? How did it make you feel? What did it feel like to be in the forest? Many reported new feelings of relaxation and tranquility or awe and wonder beholding the forest beauty. They felt the chilly air prickling their cheeks. Some smelt nothing. They said that the air was so pure they couldn't register a fragrance. Others detected the aroma of dirt, evidence of the healthy microbes releasing that quintessential earth smell. They heard the roar of Lookout Creek and the swooshing of pants as we walked. They saw deciduous trees ablaze with the fiery hues of fall. And a few pointed out the perceived out-of-place human artifacts of pipes and tree-climbing platforms. Humans are embedded in this place just like the water that persists even in the absence of rain. We leave legacies of destruction in the form of clear cuts, legacies of curiosity in the form of tree tags, water gauges, and instrumentation, and legacies of love in the form of long-term inquiry that seeks to understand our role within connected eco-communities. So we just finished up our reflection on the Discovery Trail, before the Discovery Trail, after the Silent Sensory Walk. And we're at the kiosk now. So at this time, the students are splitting into their groups and we're handing out their iPads. They get a chance to test out the iPad there with some of the staff there so we can troubleshoot any problems they may be having. We also give them instructions on how to use the iPad program, and we give them a trail map so they can navigate the Discovery Trail. At this point, they complete a pre-trail stop on the iPad, and we collect some data from them before they get onto the Discovery Trail. And each group picks a group name and inputs their individual name. They do this before every stop on the Discovery Trail, and that's how we were able to match the data throughout the experience. So these questions that we're asking on the iPad, they serve both as a way to facilitate part of the curriculum and as a way to collect data. But we remind the groups that the goal is not just to answer the questions as quickly as they can. It's not like a test. The questions are supposed to be an invitation to explore the forest processes and to contemplate their relationships with place. We encourage the students to work on these stops as a group and to talk to each other, talk it through before they're inputting anything on the iPad. And we also ask them to rotate the iPad so that each student gets a chance being a leader in their group and to encourage some more collaborative thinking. So the students receive all these instructions and then they venture onto the Discovery Trail alone. We don't really try to get into their experience at all. It's really about the students and their experience. We float around the trail in case anyone has questions, they get lost, they're having problems with the iPads, and we also take pictures of them. That's how we got all these great pictures. So the Discovery Trail itself has 10 stops. But we only have time for the students to complete 3 stops on the trail. We learned this after the first year, that the stops are taking actually a lot longer than we expected. So we have about 20 minutes per stop that the students complete. And these stops are they're place-driven. We invite the students to observe their surroundings and explore questions about what they're seeing, like rotting logs, forest succession, and dry stream beds. The interactive curriculum features work from Andrew's scientists, Andrew's artists, and writers, and this is delivered via text, data, images, and audio on the iPads. We combine content about things like disturbances, floods, and management practices with creative writing that features traditional ecological knowledge and forest creatures, among other topics. We also provide activities to reflect on personal experiences and create drawings, sound maps, and storyboards. So once we realized that they actually need more time at each stop, and we were having some issues with the logistics, making sure that we didn't have a whole bunch of students at one stop at a time, after the first year, I went ahead and created some stop groupings. So all of these stop groupings, they allow us to achieve the things on the left side: place, reflection, and observation, creative activity, personal and values reflection, mindfulness activity, creative writing, and the creative writing is they're hearing creative writing, not that they're actively doing the writing. They see a graph or diagram, and they're covering in GSS, which is the next generation science standards, cross-cutting concepts of stability and change, cause and effect, patterns, and systems. So any of these stops on their own are not achieving all of these things, but once they're grouped together, we're trying to create a comparable experience across all of the students who are coming to the Discovery Trail. And today I'm going to tell you about Group 2. So we'll imagine we're Group 2, and we'll visit stops 2, 3, and 7. So first we have stop 2. This is the forest opening stop. At this stop, the students read about disturbances, then they observe their surroundings to determine what caused the forest opening. After hypothesizing about the cause, we tell them about the windstorm that happened here in 2010. They also imagine what this place will look like in 50 years and identify some of the plants in the areas to understand what thrives in light gaps. They contemplate changes that have happened in their own life, and then they share these experiences with their group. They consider how change in a forest is similar to change in their lives. The goal for this stop is for students to consider the complexities of disturbance and change, that it doesn't have to be inherently bad, that there can be benefits to disturbances for some plant and animal communities, and that personal change may seem negative, but could also be positive because we grow and adapt from these experiences. So on the left, you see just a screenshot of what the students would be seeing on the iPad. And even with all of our stop grouping efforts, we did get 2 groups on this stop. One was finishing up as the other one was coming, but it still is a lot more streamlined. So next we have stop 3. The group starts by contemplating why there's a stream bed here. You can see they're standing in a stream bed. The group then views a paired photo and a graphical time lapse that you see over here. And this shows how the stream bed fills with water, and there's a photo that correlates every day to a box that moves across the time scale so they can see how much rainfall fell on that day. And then they interpret this data to predict the correlation between stream flow and rainfall. They then learn about watersheds, and they hear excerpts from Robin Wall Kimmerer's interview with the watershed essay. And that essay explores the ways we understand water and asks us to listen to the land for water and water for stories, using languages of science, data, poetry, and traditional ecological knowledge. The students end by contemplating human impacts on water and whether we have responsibilities to protect land and water. Group 2 ends with stop 7, canopy critters. At the stop, students start by considering the characteristics of old growth forests, which they're currently standing in. They think about how it feels, kind of similar to what we asked them to do in the silent sensory walk. And then they reflect on why we may value or appreciate different kinds of forests, including old growth and plantation forests. Then they see videos of red tree voles and spotted owls. They hear a reading from Tim Fox about spotted owls. And they learn about the intensive harvesting of old growth and how these practices led to the spotted owl being listed as a threatened species. The students contemplate what life would be like as a spotted owl or a red tree vole during a guided reflection activity that is recorded. And then they create storyboards of their animals' lives, which they do on these clipboards and handouts that you see on the ground. And then they finish up and they do a post-trail stop. This is again for our data analysis. They can do it anywhere on the trail, so if there's a place that they didn't get to visit, they have that opportunity to see another part of the trail. And then we head back to the pavilion for lunch and end with a group reflection activity and a survey. Now I'm going to highlight the student experience based on my data analysis, which led to our creation of a typology of care. So the Discovery Trail experience is not just an education program, it is an active research endeavor. And our research question is, how does the Discovery Trail Interpretive Experience impact student understanding and care about place? For our research methods, as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, we were only using the data from the students on the fall 2017 trips. That was 2 groups of students from 2 different high schools nearby, one nearby the Andrews and one in Cottage Grove. And the reason we were only using this data was because of all of the changes we made over the summer, because we had a lot more data after we added the pre and the post questions, and because these were comparable experiences. But as a reminder, we have had 119 students visit the Discovery Trail, and all of that data before these 26 students was not for nothing, because we were able to streamline the curriculum and make a better experience for the students who came later. So I talked a little bit about our data collection. We had those pre and the post trail questions on the iPads that they do at the kiosk and then anywhere on the trail after their 3 stops. These questions ask things about the human-nature relationship. We ask students whether they consider themselves part of nature. We ask about why they value the forest, and we ask about their perceptions of human impacts on the forest, among other questions. Then we have the trail stop questions. This is the actual curriculum. So some of it we can use for the data, but a lot of it is meant for the students to really explore those relationships that we were talking about earlier. Then we have the reflection activity. This is really brief. Lissy one time came, she was able to come back from Michigan and come and visit, and she did it with a drop of a hat, and then I wrote it all down and we created a reflection activity from it, and it's been working really well and we're getting great data from it. So we asked the students to explain their experience in 1 word, to describe the moment that encapsulates that 1 word, to tell us what they want to learn about, what inspired more learning for them, what they did learn about on the trail, and other similar questions. Then we have the post-trail survey. This is done individually, and here's just a sense for some of the questions that we asked. We have 11 questions total. Most of them are short answer, and the only place where we have Likert questions and all of our data is on this survey. Everything else is open-ended, short answer questions that we're using for our analysis. We also have teacher interviews, which I'm not going to be able to talk about today, but I'm happy to answer questions during the Q&A session if you're interested in how the teachers are perceiving this experience and what benefits they think that students are getting from it. So our data analysis was primarily an interpretive qualitative analysis using those responses to the short answer questions before, during, and after the trail. We used emergent coding. So that means we didn't start with a theory, we didn't start with a hypothesis. The analysis flowed from the students. It flowed from the data that we got from the students. There are a few Likert statements. In these Likert statements, the students are able to report an increase that they think may have happened for them on the Discovery Trail. So it's a chance for them to self-report any shifts that they thought they experienced from the trail. And then we used all of this to create a conceptual model of care. So as I coded the entire data set in individual questions, what emerged was a typology of care, or a range of stages and attributes of care that students experienced and expressed with increasing levels of investment and responsibility. These stages include feeling restored, considering the self-place relationship, appreciating more than self, learning to care, and expressing responsibility to care. You'll see there are 2 different colors. The blue color is to indicate that the students are really thinking in a more self-involved way, and the green indicates that they're moving more towards appreciating, learning, or expressing care for more than self. These stages demonstrate the student's ability to care for self based on the Discovery Trail experience, and they also suggest attributes that might lead to student intention to care for something more than self. The data suggests the students don't experience these stages temporally or because of one specific element of the experience alone. Different parts of the experience led to the same type of care for different students. Some students may experience these stages simultaneously during the field experience, and a few students skip stages to land at these more invested stages of care. We use mostly unprompted responses to develop this model. So there may be cases when a stage would resonate with the student, but the data doesn't suggest it because we didn't have that in their responses. Even though these stages don't necessarily happen in this order, meaning they can be fractal, I'm presenting these stages as a progression based on the frequency of occurrence, meaning the first stages have the most students actually experiencing them, and as we go on, we have fewer students experiencing it. All of the students from the fall trips reported feeling restored, showing a capacity for self-care during the experience. 65% of the students recognized, contemplated, or reflected on their relationships with place. 65% of the students also reported a newfound appreciation for forests and living things in the forest in response to a lighter statement or in short answers. 46% of the students who attended the fall trip said that Discovery Trail increased their interest to learn to care, and the final stage had 38% of students expressing a collective or individual responsibility to care for place. So these numbers decrease as the stages increase in size because each stage is an accretion that requires more commitment from the students. This progression correlates with our goal to empower students to act in environmentally responsible ways. With each stage, the student gets closer to engaging in an ecological caring ethic or feeling compelled to act on behalf of the environment for its own sake. The earlier stages can be seen as stepping stones to act in caring ways. Now I'm going to explain each stage, and I'll give you an example from the data so that you can better understand what these types mean. So as I said, every student participant reported feeling restored. That means they said they felt at peace, relaxed, free, calm, refreshed, or rejuvenated because of the Discovery Trail experience. By reporting a change in their state of being, i.e. being more calm, the students expressed an awareness of the impact of the forest on their individual well-being, a basic level of self-care. This consistent impact of the Discovery Trail Interpretive Experience parallels environmental education literature that promotes outdoor excursions as a way to promote self-care. 10 of the students attributed this feeling to the silent sensory walk. One student said, "I remember the sensory walk at the beginning and how peaceful that was. It was like nothing else existed." Then later, describing her whole experience at the Andrews Forest, she wrote, When I picture the word peaceful, I think of walking on the sensory walk. I also think of when we were at our stations and just listening to the forest." Other students associated their restoration with particular stops, either due to the scenery at the stop or the specific activities that they were engaging in at that stop. One student said, "We enjoyed stop 10 because it gave us a minute to sit down, relax, and really enjoy nature." According to the ethics of care literature, caring is a relational action. So in this stage, students explored the self-place relationship. They contemplated the impact of place on self, they changed their perception of place, and they considered what life would be like if they had a different relationship with place. These explorations of self-place relationship could have contributed to notions of appreciation and care for more than self in later stages. We had several categories within this stage. Some of the key ones were the impact of place on personal well-being. One student said, "Your mood can be altered by the place you're in." Another category was a change in perception of place. So the actual experience led to a change of understanding place for students. The woods can seem scary, but walking in made me feel safe and peaceful and almost spiritual. Then we had another category where students were generally just considering the place-self relationship. "I realized that I've only been living in a place and not with a place. I'm curious about what a human would do in the forest if he or she lived there all of his or her life." Other categories in this stage included place sparking self-reflection, place having agency, and a shift in understanding whether or not humans are or are not a part of nature. So then we have appreciating more than self. We had 66.7% of students agree or strongly agree with the Likert statement, the Discovery Trail experience increased my appreciation for forests as a whole. This was the most frequently positive response that we got from the students. So we had 11 Likert statements, and it received the highest number of positive responses. The second highest number of positive responses we received about the impact of the Discovery Trail was that it increased student appreciation for living things in the forest. We also had a student who didn't respond positively to these Likert statements, but in one of their short answer questions, they said, the forest is a nice place where animals can live, like birds and others, and it's a really good place to have life in it. So what does it mean to appreciate more than self? In the post-trail stop, every student reflected on why they valued the forest, and those answers provide some more context to interpret these results. Some students expressing an increase in appreciation may be moving toward a more reciprocal, caring relationship and gratitude for a non-anthropocentric value of the forest. These students, amounting to 4, value the forest because it provides something that all life needs, water. However, many students in this appreciation stage, at least based on their responses, value the forest in anthropocentric ways. For our non-humanities people in here, when I'm saying anthropocentric, I'm just talking about human centrism. So they're just like thinking only about humans and what is of value for humans. At the most utilitarian level or instrumental level, one student most valued the wood products that we use every day. On a more spiritual level, students valued the forest for its sense of peace and calm. According to ecofeminists, love, respect, and gratitude for nature are necessary for an ecological ethic of caring. So appreciation is necessary to actively care for the more than human. But they argue to truly care for the more than human, we should not only be motivated by the anthropocentric values the forest provides us, we should also recognize non-anthropocentric and intrinsic values of nature. So then we have learning to care. We had 50% of the students agree or strongly agree with the statement, the Discovery Trail increased my interest to learn how to care for natural systems. To express an interest to learn to care for more than self means the students are beginning to be motivated more toward action rather than just experiencing restoration, considering the self-place relationship, or appreciating more than self. 2 students who responded positively to the Likert statement also expressed an interest to learn how to care in their short answer responses. One student said, I want to learn the ways we can protect the forest we have. And another said, we can conserve and learn about the environment so we can become aware when they were considering how we can limit our impact on the environment. Our final stage is really where this analysis started. So these are all unprompted responses that we received where students are expressing a caring responsibility. We found this first in the data and then worked backwards to understand how students might be getting to expressing a caring responsibility. So in this final stage, students express collective and individual responsibility to care for forests, nature, and ecosystems, which can be interpreted as a kind of intention to participate in responsible environmental behavior. All of these expressions were unprompted. We weren't asking about care, even though we do ask about it on the trail. And these expressions were in response to questions about the shifts in understanding place, about the place-self relationship, and changes in perceptions of their own special places, as well as reflections about why they value forests. Students explain ways to care as maintaining the beauty of the forest, ensuring forest health, limiting the harvest of forests, using only what we need, limiting our impacts, and maintaining cleanliness and safety. Students in this final stage thought we should care about place and that we have a collective responsibility, and even for a few students, an individual responsibility to care for forests. What prompted care in the students was a personal connection to place, a concern about limited resources, a commitment to ensure that places stay beautiful, and an extension of home responsibilities onto other places. One student actually moved through all of these stages, and that's the first one we have listed on the slide. They said, the Discovery Trail experience helped us understand the importance of caring for the ecosystem. Seeing the beauty of pristine nature makes me want to clean up the world and make all of it look like this. Learning about this place makes me realize how taking care of the environment provides a safe place for all animals and plants, and also a safe place of mind. So in this, we could see how they may come from feeling restored and move through this, even in this last response. Another student said, I understood how the only way to admire the beauty of the woods and the species that live there is by maintaining it clean and safe. Another student said, the Discovery Trail experience made me think what a beautiful place we live in and that we should keep our forest healthy. So in these examples, you see those themes of cleanliness, beauty, health, and in some ways, even how it could connect back to that first stage, like I just mentioned. So just to see the data in another way, we're thinking about these stages as increasing levels of investment, getting closer and closer to caring actions. Then you can look at it in terms of what was the last stage that these students experienced. 16 students didn't reach the final stage, but 10 did. 5 of those students in the final stage went through every single stage that we found, and a few skipped one stage. So in conclusion, place is interpreted in unique ways because it's mediated by our experiences, values, and worldviews. Care also is dependent on the individual expressing or manifesting care. One student may only recognize how the forest helps her care for herself, like in the feeling restored and considering the self-place relationship stages, while others believe humans have a collective or individual responsibility to care for place. One student may consider reforestation after a clear cut the highest form of care we have responsibilities to enact. Other students may think we should limit our use of resources as a whole or protect forests for their own sake. The place-based sensory engagement and the arts and humanities approaches integrated into the Discovery Trail experience offered students the opportunity to connect with place and consider their relationships to it. However, the students don't express specifics about what beauty, cleanliness, and safety means to them. Their different perceptions of these states could result in caring actions that don't actually positively benefit the forest in the ways that they imagine they will. So we can provide opportunities for students to explore diverse worldviews, including non-anthropocentric ecological caring ethics. We can encourage effective engagement with place alongside development of content knowledge with place. But it's really up to the students to acknowledge and reflect on their own values and ideas about what it means to be a steward on their terms. So very briefly, so we can get to the Q&A, I'm just gonna mention some limitations that I think we have. Obviously, incomplete data for some trips. In that first year, we were having issues with technology. Some of the students weren't able to submit their data. We were having some logistical issues with who had research approval. The short answers are short, as you noticed in the examples. Typing on an iPad with one finger is not fun for anyone. So the students may not be sharing, well, actually, I know for a fact the students are not sharing as much as they could because I'm in the field listening to them. I am able to take some field notes with students, but I don't have enough data to supplement some of the iPad questions we're getting. But the benefit is we get a lot of data from them using the iPads. We can identify which stops or aspects of the experience are motivating some of these stages of care, and we're lacking adequate pre-experience data. We only have a few questions, and we'd really like to know more about these students before they come to the forest. So the next steps are editing and submitting publications, a workshop to create a teacher-led experience at the forest so they can completely self-guide this experience without our help, to normalize, de-identify, and share data publicly, to streamline the curriculum further and adding additional stops, which Mark is really excited about, and to create manuals to support project sustainability and serve as a case study for other sites. And one other next step is me finding a job, and I've been told recently that I should tell everyone I know that I'm looking for a job, and I think this is a great setting to do that. So with that, I thank you. We'll hear my references very briefly, thanks to all of the scholars who I was able to cite and my photographers. And thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your presence. And I'd like to end with just some gratitude and acknowledgements, and we'll have a few minutes for questions. First, I want to acknowledge the place that all of us are currently occupying. We're here in Corvallis as guests in the traditional homelands of the Chipinahua Band of the Kalapuya, who were forcibly removed to what are now the Grand Ronde and Siletz reservations. I'm deeply grateful for all of the elders, scholars, and colleagues who opened my eyes to these injustices associated with our conservation and environmental history. Michael, thank you for always reminding me that we're liberated. Every time you did, I felt a little bit of stress dissipate. You ensured that I was supported throughout my entire degree program. You challenged me to be a better writer and a more critical thinker, and you were always ready for a brainstorming session at the drop of a hat. You graciously allowed me to work through my creative process and my intellectual process at my own pace, and I really am appreciative for that. To Lissy, Kari, and my unofficial committee member, Mark, we made quite the team. It was a true pleasure to work with all of you leading this project. Thank you for trusting my abilities and helping me with the skills that I lacked. Thank you for gifting me this project, a labor of love for several years. And I appreciate your constant words of encouragement, your thoughtful feedback, and your dedication to my success. I have to thank Kate, who stepped in to communicate and recruit teachers. She's not here today, but without her, we wouldn't have field trips. Thanks also to Chris and Ginny, who spent a lot of time streamlining the database and the iPad program functionality. To the lab, who must not be named. To the EAH cohorts and Carly and Jake, thank you for supporting my intellectual growth and providing me with community. I cherish each of you and your valuable input along the way. To the LTER community, thank you for accepting me as one of your own and for providing me with a beautiful place where I could translate my learning into action. Thank you to my Texas family and friends who were joining us on Facebook down there and supported my move to Oregon. You were always ready to lift my spirits while I was struggling, and some of you even recognized your own connection to our collective ecological well-being. Sorry, and started making changes to live in more caring ways, and that really meant a lot to me. I didn't think I would cry. And this is the hardest part. To my rock and my partner in life, Dewan, thank you for encouraging me to have big aspirations and being open to moving. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. It's really awkward. Being open to moving halfway across the country. Leaving behind all of our loved ones and our nice, cushy jobs so I could follow my passions. You were my sounding board, willing to work through all of my half-baked ideas, and you sustained me by cooking me delicious food and making me laugh every day and loving me unconditionally. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Sarah. We have some time for Q&A. We'll go to the top of the hour, and then we'll have a little 15-minute recess, and then you all leave. Juan's going to lead you out the door with donuts, so you'll have no choice. And then the committee will reconvene here at the quarter after. So questions for Sarah?
And let me just unmute everyone real quick and stop sharing the screen. Sorry, this is kind of cumbersome. But you can ask while I'm doing this. So yeah, does anyone have any questions?
I was just wondering if you were able to show us some of the stuff that the students see in their iPads.
Yes, great question. So
Almost like it was planned.
it was almost like it was. So this is what the students see when they're out there at the Andrews Forest. This is a dev site, so it looks a little bit different, but they click on that and then they start with an introduction. And this is really cool. Chris figured this out. He's in the audience right now. That you can change the numbers. So this is how we're getting that data matching. And you just put in your group name and all of your names. Click next. And then you can see that it would have the person's name here. So we're able to get individual data from the students for our analysis by doing this. And I won't show you all of it, but that just gives you a sense for what it looks like. It's pretty basic. I mean, it's more like a website form. Over time, we'd like to make it more interactive. That takes a lot of money and time, and for now, it's working really well, and the students are really enjoying it. So, does anyone else have any other questions?
Sarah, who do you want to follow?
I just wanted to unmute. Okay. Yes. Jake.
I was just wanted to ask you about the student part of it, and if you could comment on, I don't know if you were just looking for a targeted opportunity because you had classes, or if there's a reason to choose the students, because I was just fascinated by this idea of moving from thinking about yourself to care about the world. And as a parent of a teenager, I think about that a lot. And so is there something about that age group that you thought was particularly that you really wanted to target? Or possibly have you thought about how the results might be different if you looked at a different age group? I'm curious about age group and target audience.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think depending on who you're citing, you really can't do a lot of this philosophical inquiry at a younger age. The students haven't developed that much yet. So that's one reason why you could do it with high school students and not do it with a younger age group. So I don't know if it would have the same effect on students, but maybe it would, because others are saying that they need to have these really important nature experiences at a young age. So it would be more about the place-based experience and maybe less about the kinds of questions that we're asking them. But I think, you know, Lissy and Kari can chime in about the motivation for doing middle and high school students. But I think it was more about the curriculum itself.
Yeah, definitely. I think we have done a lot of teacher professional development at the Andrews over the years, and it's almost all been middle and high school, because we are working at this kind of higher level of content kinds of things, because we're kind of used to working with undergrads, grad level. So in that way, we felt like middle and high school would be reachable in that way, because we have other interests in this as well, which we haven't explored as much yet around, you know, learning more science content kind of things as well. And so this was definitely more appropriate to middle and high school. So that was some of it. And as far as sending them out on the trail in, you know, small groups on their own, certainly, you know, you're not going to do that with the younger kids.
Yeah, great point. Especially with Lookout Creek just rolling right there at stop 6. Yeah. Jason, do you have a question? Yeah.
So a little bit with Jake. You said you were trying to foment this stewardship on their own terms with the students there. And it sounded like you're getting good progress with this cleanliness and beauty and the safety aspects of those virtue ethics. I'm wondering, you mentioned earlier that there's this sense of nature that is not pretty or not clean or not necessarily safe. That is a big part of that sort of destructive, necessary destructive power of nature, for lack of a better term. I'm wondering if you've thought of how to incorporate some of that development for their stewardship in this program.
That's a great question. Lissy and everyone, can you hear the questions, by the way?
I can sort of hear it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
not too well.
okay. So I'm going to try to restate that. Essentially, how can we be thinking more about the kind of complexities that we're trying to communicate on the Discovery Trail, like that a disturbance isn't just bad or good, and how that connects to their notion of what stewardship is? Is that good? Sorry.
Especially moving past like the beauty ethic and the romanticization of nature and going like, oh yeah, nature is also destructive, or it's also unsafe, or it has all these other qualities that are sort of harder to sell.
Yeah. I think when we're talking about disturbances like fire in particular, we're actually trying to get them away of thinking of it as just destructive. And we're wanting them to understand the life that comes after this kind of destruction, which in some ways could maybe complicate their understanding of what we should do, because you can see destruction in a clear cut, but we know that it's not good for soil. We know that there are a lot of negatives that come from a clear cut. So we are complicating what kind of decisions that they should make. But in a lot of Lissy's earlier research, which she can comment on better than I can, she saw that in moving towards stewardship, the students were really moving past these dualisms into more complex understandings. So even if they won't figure it out at Discovery Trail. Like, this is a very short experience. This is just one thing. It's not happening in a vacuum. They're coming here with their own values and emotions and experiences, and they're leaving maybe with some things that they're remembering and maybe not. But it is getting them to start questioning maybe some notions that they're told should just be right or wrong. That's, I think, as best as I can answer that. But great question, Jason. Kate?
I have a little bit more of a softball question, just for my own curiosity. I think it's really amazing what you did and how much insight you were able to gain from just that fall data. But within that, anecdotally, did you see a difference between the kids that were from right down the road versus Cottage Grove, or was it, because sometimes in environmental ed, I've noticed that what I expect is the opposite of what I get with the kids that are coming out from a certain area. So
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, great question. So Kate just asked whether or not we saw a difference in the Cottage Grove kids who were closer to the Andrews versus, the Cottage Grove kids who were further from the Andrews in a more urban environment versus the Mackenzie High kids who were right there. And there's one thing in particular that stood out to me, and it was after they got off of the silent sensory walk. The students who lived nearby, they all got off of the walk and they stayed in their line and they were completely quiet. They didn't say a word. And they were just like enjoying that moment. And then the Cottage Grove kids, and that's the one that I shared today from my essay, they came out and they were just talking and ready to go and laughing. And that was the biggest thing that I noticed. But otherwise, I would say they had very similar responses. They seemed to take away the same things from the experience. And if anything, the students from Mackenzie High, I think they may have even had more appreciation because they said they were tired of being in the forest. They didn't know if they would like the experience. They don't like living in that area, but being there made them maybe rekindle it, and they said they wanted to get out into the forest more. Yeah, great question. Shane?
I have two quick methods related questions.
Yeah.
First is, how many coders did you have in your immersion coding? Was it just you, or did you have?
I was doing mostly all of the coding, and then Lissy, Kari, and I met about every 2 weeks, and we went over what I had just coded, and they helped me with a lot. They helped me with naming and really thinking about the themes, but I was primarily doing the coding. And I mean, we may go back and look at it more because we're not done with the publication, and there's some parts of my analysis I know that need improvement, and I'll be able to get that support from my committee. What was your other methods?
Related to that, I was just wondering if you felt that you had content saturation in the sample you had. Do you feel like a lot of students were repeating the same kinds of claims or perceptions, or was there a lot of variation?
I think for expressing caring responsibility, there was a lot of saturation, and the main themes were the beauty, cleanliness, and safety that we were seeing. Beauty and restoration were probably the biggest two themes from all of the data that we were getting from the students. And we may look back at it and say, oh, we need to maybe do a better job of telling that story. Yeah. One more question. I want to know both of your questions, but Ray, I'll go with Ray.
I was going to ask you a question about one of your comments that you were maybe about 5 minutes ago about the long-term effect of this kind of program and the difficulties of actually identifying, measuring that long-term effect. I was wondering if you've given much thought to the ways in which this kind of program could be kind of duplicated at a high school level, following middle school programs to kind of develop the curriculum to be able to measure perhaps some of these more long-term effects of the experience.
Yeah, so your question is how we could study the specific students who have come to the forest already and see how the experience has maybe changed them over time. Is that a good?
Or in some way measure that, there's that kind of, whether you scaled it out, the kind of concern for beauty, the concern for the self, and then the care for others, and just figuring out exactly how that is sustainable.
Yeah.
Right? If that's beyond the day,
Yeah.
day experience from research force.
Yeah,
How to
that's,
measure that or how to
yeah. Yeah, I think there are a lot of good examples of that in education research. I think that it is very time consuming to do something like that and difficult. Our biggest challenge is the things that we're encouraging the teachers to do in the classroom, both before and after, they don't necessarily have the time to do. And these teachers, I mean, they are heroes. Like, all that they are doing is astounding, and that they are even able to make it work to come out to the field is really significant. But what we are doing is interviewing the teachers several weeks to a month after the experience, and we're giving them some things to look for in the classroom, and we ask them about any shifts that they may be seeing in their students. We had one teacher who actually added a couple questions about the Discovery Trail on their final exam, and we were able to use some of that in her teacher interview to understand how this may be impacting the students. And the biggest thing we're seeing is that they are thinking about a whole new career now. Like, they want to be out in the field, they want to be doing this work. So that was something that we weren't necessarily looking for, and it came through in the teacher interviews, and we started ramping that up and focusing more on, like, this is a place of work and this is something that you can do and you can imagine yourself here doing this work. So that was something really exciting that we saw from the data. Yeah, and it would be great if we could do more of that, and we'll talk more about how we could do that over time. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.